The United States and Saudi Arabia now have joined forces to strike Iran-backed terror sites in Iraq after the regime launched a surprise missile attack on American troops in the region who were traveling to Jordan.
The commander-in-chief now weighing next steps after holding high-stakes meetings with world leaders at the White House.
So Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst is live in Tel Aviv with all the action. All right, Trey, make sense of it.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Overnight, Iran launched a surprise attack against U.S. forces in Jordan. At least 5 missiles were fired by Iran, breaking the lull in fighting over the past several days. CENTCOM released a statement saying at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time today, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps forces launched multiple ballistic missiles from Iran in an attempted surprise attack on U.S. forces based in the Middle East. All Iranian missiles were successfully intercepted. U.S. forces remain vigilant and at a high state of readiness. The United States has not yet responded to that attack, but overnight, U.S. and Saudi planes conducted a series of airstrikes against Iran-backed Shia militias in Iraq, who were responsible for 30 drone attacks over the past 3 days. On those strikes, CENTCOM said the unwarranted attacks against U.S. forces were not successful. From February through April 2026, there were more than 600 attempted attacks on U.S. citizens and facilities by Iran-aligned terrorist militias in Iraq. The IRGC and its terrorist proxies must cease these attacks to avoid further U.S. military response. This kinetic action in the Middle East comes as reports indicate Iran has rejected an Omani proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. On Tuesday, President Trump held a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the pair decide the next steps in the war with Iran.
Look at this regime today. It's attacking everybody in sight. It's attacking Saudi Arabia. It's attacking Kuwait. It's attacking Bahrain. It's attacking the UAE and others. It's attacking everything in sight, and it murdered and maimed tens of thousands of its own citizens. This is what this regime in Iran does today when it doesn't have nuclear weapons. Now imagine what they will do to the world if they had nuclear weapons. And that's what we have to make sure that we prevent.
With no diplomatic breakthroughs, the region may see more intense fighting in the days ahead. Guys?
So, Trey, whatever truce we were under, whatever talks may have been taking place, it didn't seem to matter. But the IRGC says it's wrong to assume that we told the Iraqi militia to rocket U.S. interests or Saudi interests. They don't expect us to buy that they would act independently, do you? Do they really expect that statement to fly?
Even if the IRGC was telling the truth, and in this case they are not, the next question would be, why did you launch 5 ballistic missiles at U.S. forces overnight after the president offered you another negotiation window?
Right.
But when it comes to the proxy groups across the region, the IRGC has direct control and funding of these organizations, not just these Shia militias in Iraq, but also the Houthis in Yemen and the threats that they have made against the Bab al-Mandab Strait, this entrance to the Red Sea. And so while the Iranians continue to say that they are looking for some sort of negotiated settlement, the reality on the ground is quite different. And again, this strike overnight is significant, these airstrikes against these militia groups. It is not unexpected, given the number of drones that were launched over the past 72 hours. But really, the focus here is on that missile attack overnight against U.S. forces in Jordan. Remember, earlier this month, 3 American service members were killed in Jordan by these exact Iranian ballistic missiles. And that is exactly what they were trying to do overnight, kill more American soldiers. And according to CENTCOM, those missiles were intercepted.
And Trey, what is new about today's news is the fact that Saudi Arabia, this is the first time Saudi Arabia has really gotten involved in this. And they say they don't want a further escalation, but they just want to be able to protect their energy infrastructure. So, I mean, that's quite a message to Iran from the kingdom. Hey, don't screw with us, guys.
You really do have to consider the calculation here, because the firepower from the United States and Saudi Arabia greatly outweighs the ability for these Iran-backed Iraqi Shia militias to actually defend against any incoming attacks. But yet they are still launching drones, not just at Saudi Arabia, but also U.S. forces in the region and Israel. The Israelis say they shot down over the past several days a number of drones along the border with Jordan. And it gives you a sense of what these drones threaten. And remember, there was another U.S. service member killed when they were disarming one of these drones in northern Iraq. And so there are a lot of moving parts here, but the proxy forces of the Iranian regime have been directly attached to officials in Tehran. Remember, last week, President Trump issued a warning to the Houthis in Yemen, and he said if you launch missile or drone attacks against shipping vessels in the Red Sea, then not only will the Houthis pay a price, but also the Iranian regime. And so we are likely to see an escalation here in the response from U.S. forces, Saudi forces, and others, because they want to send a clear message to Iran that whether you attack from your own territory or you use your proxies in the region, there will be a price to pay.
Yeah.
Trey, we're talking about the military aspect of this war, but there's also been a great financial strain to Iran, both with the naval blockades as well as the war itself. How sustainable is that financial strain for Iran?
It's not very sustainable at all, and that's why the Iranians are painted in a corner here. They have to make some sort of decision, and it's a binary decision. They're either going to return to war with the United States of America, or they're going to sign a negotiated settlement that addresses opening the Strait of Hormuz and their nuclear ambitions. And that is why the region is such at a critical point right now, and why that meeting yesterday in the Oval Office between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was so significant. The Iranians are economically suffering as a result of the U.S. naval blockade of their ports. They are losing hundreds of millions of dollars each and every day. Inflation is rapidly rising in Iran. We have heard from Iranian civilians who are having trouble keeping their businesses open. Yeah. The IRGC reportedly cannot even pay its own soldiers as a result of the lost funds because they're not able to export their critical thing, and that is oil. And as a result of this U.S. naval blockade, they are being choked off economically. And they're in a position now where they have to make a decision. Are they going to sign a negotiated settlement or return to war?
Good question. All right, Trey, reporting live from the region. Thank you very much for joining us live.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.